If your ideal tenant is a travel medical professional or a nurse, well, then you're definitely going to put blackout curtains. Not that you wouldn't for another guest, but then you might also put a box fan and a sound machine because they might be sleeping during the day. You're going to look at the kitchen differently. You're going to make sure they have everything that you would want if you lived in a place for 3 months. Whereas if you're catering to bachelor pads, they probably don't need a salad spinner.
What's going on, guys? In this episode of the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast, we have Bigger Pockets' own Sarah Weaver, who is the official midterm rental expert over there. If you're unfamiliar with what a midterm rental is, basically it's like the mix between a long-term and a short-term rental, right? So short-term rental, people think of things like Airbnb. Long-term rental, people think of things on like 6 and 12-month leases. This is for midterm. So it's like traveling corporate professionals, traveling nurses, people that are displaced for insurance reasons. And they're typically furnished rentals and they can get you a bit more cash flow. And it's a unique niche that she has conquered in so many different ways. Not only as an investor, but she's also built out like all these businesses to support people that want to run a similar business model.
She's like I wrote down the quote from what I was gathering about her. And it's like, she's like a multi-dimensional person and is like tons of energy, great person. But like when you say started several businesses, that's exactly it. And I think her businesses, her personality comes out into her businesses and it's super cool. And I don't feel very confident about a lot of people doing things, but I felt really confident about what she was talking about and how she ran and started her midterm rental business. Her invested adventures was really cool. I know you were kind of really keen on that one as well. Just a lot of cool stuff going on with her.
Yeah. Well, the thing I think that's so powerful about the businesses that she's built and what she's done is she has taken stuff that was her interest and her need, and she's turned those into businesses and services for other people, which are always the best businesses. You know, like there's nothing worse than these people that identify an opportunity and they try to build a business, solve the opportunity, but they don't actually have any experience in that space. So like, you know, amongst her businesses, she has like a whole business where they will fly to wherever you buy your property and set your midterm rental up for you.
Yeah. It's a great price. She talks about pricing.
It's super awesome price. She goes into it, but that came from her need to be able to do that. And then now she has this invested adventures business, which is a way for people that are real estate investors that are financial freedom minded to go on epic trips with other people that have that same sort of like financial interest. So you don't have to worry about like going on these trips with like people that, you know, you have nothing in common with. Mm-hmm. And just like she did that because of her own love and interest with travel. And it's really brilliant how it all came together. So either way, I was just super, super impressed with her. And she has a lot of really great stuff going on. Cool.
I got nothing. Mic drop. I have nothing to say after that. Like, you're good. You're like looking at me like, man.
Well,
just listen to the episode.
I thought you were getting something, but yeah. Anyways, guys, this episode with Sarah Weaver is really awesome. And as she emphasized at the end, absolutely reach out to her on her Instagram. People do these things because they want you to engage with them. And, you know, she's more than happy to engage with you too and answer any questions that you have about midterm rentals or investing. So definitely make sure you do that. Besides that, please share this with anyone that you know, especially if they're interested in real estate investing or just hearing cool stories. We got tons of those in here. And if you want to start finding your own off-market deals, go to collectingkeyspodcast.com/free. You can get your own 5-step guide to start generating off-market leads so you can hopefully buy some discounted properties that you can turn into cash flow cows with this midterm rental strategy. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening and enjoy the show with Sarah Weaver. All right. We are here today with Sarah Weaver, known for being on Bigger Pockets as the midterm rental expert. You also have a book published through Bigger Pockets Publishing, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So you have the official Bigger Pockets midterm rental book, and you have 4 different businesses, including a recent one, which I personally am really excited about, called Invested Adventures, which is a travel-based business meant for real estate investors. So that's a super cool niche I'd love to dive into. But Sarah, super excited to have you on the show. For people who aren't familiar, maybe kind of give your background, introduce yourself, and, you know, fans are going to love what we have on the show today.
Oh, well, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. I am a real estate investor. I started out buying house hacking. So buying a house, living in it, renting out the rooms, and then realized I was onto something. So then when I bought my second property, well, even actually when I bought that first property, I would just buy a one-way ticket to Europe or buy a one-way ticket to South America. and kind of hacked my way through financial independence
Hmm.
because I really started living the way I wanted to be living way before I was actually financially free. So I still had a job. It just
Yeah.
allowed me to work remotely. And so I learned all of these systems and these processes to not only self-manage properties from afar, but furnish them from afar and then manage furnished rentals. And now I can even buy sight unseen, buy in a market I've never been to, and it all goes very nicely with my travel lifestyle.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've basically taken all of the objections that people always have about furnished rentals and midterm rentals and literally just said that none of those matter. Like the biggest thing people always talk about when talking about like virtual Airbnbs or midterm rentals is, getting things furnished. Like, what does that process look like? And also too, I will say, how long ago did you start getting into all this?
So I bought my first property in 2017.
Okay.
I was a licensed real estate agent in 2015. So I've been in the business for about
Mm.
7 years. And
Okay.
then furnished rentals, I started in 2021.
Okay, cool.
Wow.
So pretty recent.
Yeah.
Super
Awesome.
recent.
Yeah, awesome. But even still in like the time when we had, super hot market, it's hard to find help, hard to find
Mhm.
employees, all that sort of stuff, and you were able to figure it out.
Well, and not only figure it out for myself, but also now when people say, "Oh, well, how can I furnish?" Let's say I live in California and I want to buy in Ohio. How do I furnish it? Well, I started a company, Arya Design Services, and we can furnish it for you.
Awesome.
That's super cool. So
love
with
it.
that, I actually have a couple questions, but I'm going to start with that one because that is another cool business that would be very helpful for things Mike and I have done. With that, is that basically you can virtually essentially stage or furnish an entire home and you have all the products that are really kind of optimized for midterm rentals? Because, like certain furnitures and certain things, certain finishes aren't going to be good in an MTR. So I'm just curious how that works.
Absolutely. So we look at every client individually. So I would figure out where is your property? And
Mhm.
then we research the comps. So what are other people doing? If you come in and tell me that you want, these really nice sconces behind you
Mhm.
and neon signs and grass walls for selfies, but then you're also telling me that you want to cater to like displaced insurance
Mhm.
policy holders, families, a 4 bedroom, 2 bath. I'm like, well, do you want STR bachelor pad or do you want a home? So we really work with our clients on their strategy. So that's the difference between Arya Design Services and an interior designer.
Got
If
it.
you're going to make an absolutely stunning STR and you want the neon signs and the beautiful touches and a game room, go with an interior designer. That is not Arya Design Services
Mhm.
specialty. Ours is figuring out how do we do this as a great investment.
Mm.
And so I'm looking at the strategy, looking at the market, looking at comps, and then we're putting together an individualized design for your property. Sure, the plates, the mattress protectors, yeah, we buy the same plates and the
Right.
same mattress protectors regardless, but everything else is customized to your unit.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
You just said something there that I realized I didn't fully understand about midterm rentals, but you're saying that you have different strategies for different midterm rental niches. So I guess I've
Absolutely.
always understood that, people will do midterm rentals for like, they'll say like corporate travelers or traveling nurses or insurance. People get displaced for insurance reasons, things like that. But you're actually saying there's a different setup strategy for each one. And so do you recommend people like pick a niche when they're getting things set up or
I
like,
think I think you're not going to be pigeonholed. Like if a nurse,
yeah.
so I'm actually inside one of my MTRs this week, and if a nurse stays in it this month, and someone that's coming into town for like hail insurance policies, I've had a lot of those guys, that are here. It's still the same unit, right?
Mhm.
That's not that different. But I think where we get a big difference is when you are trying to do what I call the hybrid model
Mhm.
of it being an STR, a short-term
Mm,
rental, and a medium-term rental. They're just a little bit different. Is it not doable? Well, of course not, because this unit, actually, the one that I'm in, will switch to short-term rental
Mhm.
because we have the College World Series here in Omaha in the
Wow.
summer.
oh, okay.
And so it will switch from a medium term to a short term and back and forth. But what I encourage everyone to do, and I'm so glad that you asked this, Mike, is I encourage everyone to look at who is my ideal tenant. And if your ideal tenant is a travel medical professional or a nurse, well, then you're definitely going to put blackout curtains. Not that you wouldn't for another guest, But then you might also put a box fan and a sound machine because they might be sleeping during the day. You're going to look at the kitchen differently. You're going to make sure they have everything that you would want if you lived in a place for 3 months. Whereas if you're catering to bachelor pads, they probably don't need a salad spinner.
Yeah.
Just
I'm
guess.
laughing out loud so much because you were just listing off things Mike and I didn't even think about.
I know. I'm
Like,
sitting here going,
we're like,
what?
what? I'm like,
We're
we
also-
have
That's-
like pictures on the
Hi,
wall,
guys.
but that's about it.
Yeah.
That's why you hire Arya Design Services, because not only have we done this so many times, but it's not a good use of your time. Because let's say that one of your listeners is here and they're really good at cold calling or finding deals. Well, if they stop finding deals to then furnish the MTR that they just bought, well, guess what happens to their funnel? Bloop.
Yeah.
Now they don't have leads, and then they have all this ramp up time to get their lead funnel back and going. And so I think what I encourage everyone to do, regardless of the investing strategy that you're doing, is you run a business. So act like a business owner. So where is my time best spent? It probably isn't walking the aisles of Home Goods.
Yeah, we're not electricians, and so we don't do electrical work. Same thing with this, and it is like the especially the short term side of things, but also with the midterm, you're quite literally in a hospitality industry, and so the small nuances, like you just said, like the noise machine and blackout curtains, are such a small nuance that would be overlooked by non-experts, but to a traveling nurse who's working nights is a complete change for them, and they're going to note that and pass that on and give you good reviews and so on and so forth.
Well, and it's such a simple switch. Like, yes, I could give you a list of, here are the 5 things you should have in your medium term rental, but scratch that. Let's teach a man to fish. So here's the easy thing. Who are you renting to? Who is your ideal tenant? Well, guess what? That's how you're going to paint the walls. That's how you're going to finish the kitchen. That's how you're going to select the flooring. Like if you know you're going to have an MTR that allows pets, you might choose a different flooring. You might tear out all the carpet. You probably should do that anyway, but you're going to just think like an investor. And so it's a very simple question. You ask yourself, who is my ideal tenant?
Yeah. So on that note, how do you suggest people do that? Like, is that something that's going to be market dependent? I mean, I imagine so, especially when I think about like corporate travelers or like traveling nurses. Like I have good friends that are nurses, and the people that do the traveling nurses thing, like they get paid a lot more money, but also too, it's so they can spend some time in a good destination. Like I imagine if you live in some, I don't know, random city in middle America, like so many
Like
people
Omaha,
do.
Nebraska.
Like Omaha, Nebraska. like so that's actually a valid thing. But even I would say Omaha is like a little bit trendier. Let's say, I don't know,
Spokane, Washington.
Spokane,
Where we
Washington.
live.
Honestly, that's a great one.
Yeah.
Spokane, Washington is not going to be a common destination for there to be an abundance of traveling nurses, right? So how does someone like sort of figure out who their audience is? Like they look at the market, or do you actually think that there's a market for every sort of niche everywhere to a limited capacity?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer overall, but do I think that you could have a successful MTR in any market? Yes. Do I think that you should turn your 50 unit into 50 MTRs? No.
Yeah.
And so, but I really do believe that an MTR could work anywhere. We're seeing it happen for some investor friends of mine in small towns where I thought, no way. But guess what? The town doesn't have a furnished rental. And so when everyone goes to grandma's house in Griswold, Iowa, shout out grandma, there's nowhere to stay. There's nowhere to stay for 45 minutes. And so guess you're not having a glass of wine at Christmas dinner because you have to drive through terrible weather conditions because it's Christmas on gravel roads. It's not safe, but you have 18 family members. You can't all stay at grandma's house. And so how nice would it be if there was a furnished rental in that tiny little town? Because I'm definitely not staying at the motel anywhere near there. That's scary.
Yeah. And so I guess that's a perfect example of somewhere that I would think, right? So I guess when, so they work everywhere, is there a way that people can sort of figure out which niche, I guess, would be the best for their market?
Yep. What you want to do is you want to go to furnishedfinder.com/stats, STATS. And that will at least give you some peace of mind on like what's happening in my area. And then I go a step further and I message all of my neighboring hosts because that's networking. I mean, easy access. You can literally click a button, and I'm always completely transparent. Hi, my name's Sarah. I'm an investor. I'm thinking about buying this duplex down the road. I see that you have this furnished rental. And then I ask very specific questions. I never ask, can I pick your brain? How's it going? I'm never going to respond to a question like that. So I don't ask questions like that. Instead, I ask, I see it's listed for $12.50 a month. Are you ever getting more than that? Because people love to brag, right? So, oh yeah, actually, the other month I got $13.75. So, are you ever getting more than that? And then I ask them, are you having any issues with occupancy? And then lastly, would you recommend having a furnished rental in this area? Yes or no?
Easy.
Wow.
I love that. That's awesome. And I mean, and it's funny you're saying this. I'm like, well, duh, just freaking ask the people that are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
See if it's
And
working.
some won't answer you, obviously.
Right,
it's sales, right? And so you just ask 50 of them and you want 3 of them to get back to you. And then next thing you know, you're Instagram friends with one of them and she shares her cleaner, I share my plumber, and now we're buddies.
Yeah.
Wow.
Awesome.
And I'm going to validate your tip of furnishfinder.com / or / whatever that is, stats / stats, because I just pulled it up for Spokane, and I wish I would have known this when we signed up for furnishfinder.com. And I'm looking at our price range, which is 25.7% of MTRs for the whole house, rent for greater than $2,500, which is our price point that we wanted to be in. So, boom, I know that now.
There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's a valid tip.
Yeah.
And it's not a perfect science. The issue with medium-term rentals is that we don't have aggregated data like we do with short-term rentals, because Furnish Finder is not an OTA or a booking site.
Mm-hmm.
It's a listing site.
Right.
And so that's why you have to go that extra step and message people and communicate.
Mm-hmm.
But also you can put up a listing and just see. And hey, can I get $1,775?
Mm-hmm.
I originally thought I would rent this unit I'm in right now for $1,250. And I was stoked. I was going to cash flow like $1,500 a month because it's a fourplex.
Okay.
And that's very back of napkin math, but that sounds about right.
Yep.
Whereas I'm getting $1,875.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. That's
That
awesome.
is a
And
great
if they
deal.
book through Furnish Finder, I'm charging a pet fee, a move-in fee, of course a deposit, but that's obviously not cash in hand. But there's so much money to be made with these furnished rentals.
Yeah.
Wow. So is Furnish Finder the exclusive way to find tenants for midterm rentals, or do you use other methods?
There are other methods. So I'm using Furnish Finder, Airbnb, listing on Zillow, and I sometimes will list on Facebook Marketplace, but I usually don't like to. You get a bunch of junk.
Right.
And then it's like tied to my personal Facebook. But I do post in like very reputable Facebook groups. There's some fantastic groups out there that cater to travel nurses or travel medical professionals. And I always have good luck posting in there. However, I mean, January was a little slow, but and I stopped, and I haven't tracked the last 2 months because I'm, backdated on my tracking. But for Q4 of last year, I was 60% booked through Airbnb.
Wow. I've heard
And
that a few people telling me that Airbnb for longer stays is becoming very popular.
Well, over 23% of every booking on Airbnb is now for 28 days or more.
Really?
go.
That's interesting.
So 1 in every 4 bookings
Wow.
Yeah.
is
Came with
for
the
more
data.
than a month.
Wow.
Huh. That's
cool.
interesting. I wonder if because they kind of have like first mover advantage on like a non-committed rental.
Well, and I
right?
think
And
the
so
nice
people
thing
just
too
think-
is that they've done a good job is that you can set up long stay discounts, and so it's just a lot easier within the Airbnb app to actually negotiate and find a tenant, it seems like.
Yeah.
Well, and if you go through Furnish Finder as a tenant, you're giving me a security deposit.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving me a pet deposit. You're signing a lease, which is a little harder to get out of or do anything with. Tenants don't listen to this podcast. But so Airbnb, there's just this, it might be false sense of security, but there's this sense of security both from the host and the guest. I'm not saying that I like one better than the other. There's pros and cons to both of them, which I'm happy to dive into. But I think that as someone who actually stays in a lot of what I call medium-term rentals, because I travel all the time, I love booking through Airbnb.
Sure.
I know
Yeah.
it's going to be legit. If I walk in and the place is covered in bugs, well, it's a quick message to Airbnb and it's like, get me out of here.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. No, that makes a lot of sense. That's cool. So when it comes from like the investor side, like looking at midterm rentals, like you're going to buy a midterm rental, you're going to choose a property to be a midterm rental. What exactly should people be looking for?
It really depends on your investing strategy as a whole. If you are in an expensive market and more of an appreciation investor, it's going to be completely different. So let's talk to the masses, which I would guess is mostly cash flow investors.
Sure.
And so, us cash flow focused investors, I look at a market and similar to the question I asked, which is who's your ideal tenant? I always like to say, what's the story with this property? So, is it in a neighborhood in a path of progress? Or is it already in a good neighborhood? What's nearby? So I'm always looking at employers. I have like Omaha. I'm invested in Omaha, Kansas City, and Des Moines. And so I have Google Alerts set up for any kind of moving and shaking happening. So like company moves to Kansas City or, city plans X. Like I'm getting these emails. So I know, okay, the NFL draft is coming. We're getting a new stadium in Kansas City. All of these things, the World Cup, like all these things are happening in Kansas City. Well, then I'm looking, okay, where is that stadium going? And I'm like, okay, cool. I saw that Columbus Park, this neighborhood in Kansas City, like really gentrified and got very popular in 2019. I might even be late. Maybe it was 2018. And so I went ahead and I invested in Pendleton Heights. Not quite as desirable for any Kansas City listeners, but now that property I bought for 180, my comps are listing for 400. I don't think there's any way they're going to get 400. It's maybe, let's just call it 315. And I'd be happy if mine are comping in at 250 because I didn't even invest for appreciation, guys.
Yeah.
That I invested in that property for cash flow. And so I tell that story because I think a lot of investors, well, all of us, we're all looking for quick. Sarah says invest in Kansas City. Okay, I'm going to go run to Kansas City. No, you guys learn to think like an investor.
Yeah.
And maybe the answer for someone else is like Nampa, Idaho, just outside of Boise. Progress is starting to go that direction. Now prices are dropping, but we're seeing so you just have to put your thinking cap on. And so that's what I encourage everyone to do. And so I do that by looking at population. U-Haul actually puts out a really cool report every year about one-way moves. So like where are people moving because they, bought rented a one-way U-Haul. You can look at city-data for some of this. And then you can also just Google. And then I look at where a company's moving to. So if there's a huge Amazon warehouse facility, okay, that tells me that there's going to be growth. And then it answers the other question, who's my ideal tenant? Well, my ideal tenant probably works at the Amazon warehouse. So they're probably not going to be able to afford $4,000 a month in rent, but they could probably do $1,250. And then I reverse engineer the number. So, okay, if rent's going to be $1,250, what does my PITI have to be? Okay, what's the price point? Then can I find any properties at that price point?
Yeah. Do you do long-term rentals as well, or do you only do the midterm rentals?
Great question. I have 19 units. It's 8 buildings and 10 long-term rentals and 9 MTRs.
Perfect.
So
How did you
balanced.
how did you decide like which ones to do as MTRs versus long-term rentals?
Yeah, so the long-term rentals are the ones that I bought first. And there's no need for me to switch them over to MTRs. They already cash flow $800 a month as long-term rentals. And so I'm like, okay, that's great.
So
Less
cool.
work is good. And there's always there's a story, this property is in a really nice neighborhood. I know that my neighbors adore me because I take really good care of my lawn and I choose nice tenants. If I turn that into a medium-term rental or short-term rental, they're probably not going to be so happy.
Yeah.
And I want to own that house. I have really cool exit strategy with that house. I'm going to tear that little sucker down and build one of those mini mansions that personally I despise. But that's what the neighbors are doing.
Yeah.
And they're selling for $1 million.
Oh,
nice.
I bought
There you
bought that little Cape Cod for $217.
Nice.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so again, it's like, what's the story with that property? Then with properties that I've bought recently that I haven't turned into medium-term rentals, what I've decided to do is I'm testing the market. So I buy a duplex, I turn one into a medium-term rental and one side into a long-term rental, and then I test the market for a year.
Yeah, I love that. And that's something that's so understated amongst real estate investors is I think especially when people are starting out, like they get nervous. The fact that you're testing things, right? That's so important. And so many people think that from the second, not even the second they buy, the second that they make the commitment to buy that property, that it has to be a home run or else it's not a good investment, which is not true, right?
No.
You
And
have
they're
to,
not all home runs.
they're not all
Of
home
course not.
runs either. Exactly. But I mean, like, so Dan and I, we own what 30 something properties, and we've had so many different iterations with a lot of our properties. Like we've had ones who've been like, well, we did it as a long-term rental. The maintenance was kind of an issue. What if we just sold it as like a lease to own instead and have to worry about their maintenance anymore? Perfect.
Cool.
We'll do that. Or like, sure, we started this one as an Airbnb. Didn't really work out super well. It was too much work. What if we turned it into a midterm rental? Cool. Let's do that instead. And so many people are afraid to get their hands dirty and just like try different things. They always want to have the immediate easy answer playbook. And I love that you're saying, sorry, but that's not how it works, because that's the reality.
Learn to think, you guys. Like, learn to think and to trust your gut. And so my gut told me, we don't know. This is a new market. I had never even been to Des Moines, Iowa. I now own now own 4 duplexes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the medium term rentals are doing fantastic. And in the meantime, I kind of like the long term tenants because it's one less unit I have to fill, one less utility bill that I'm paying. I personally really like the balance.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I was going to ask you on that. How do you manage? Do you put the long terms under property management, and then your company basically runs your MTRs, or are you managing everything yourself?
So I tested it again to test the market. I tested it and I gave one building in Des Moines to a property management company who will not be named, Renters Warehouse. And it's been terrible. It's been a bad experience, and I tested it and I don't like it. And so I will be self-managing from here on out. And so I self-manage all my units. One of the struggles that people will find, those that do not want to self-manage, because it's one of those things like, I don't know, Dan, you're a parent. So sometimes I'm sure you tell your kids, like, do as I say, not as I do.
Of course, that's not the case.
sometimes it's like that with self-managing. I don't think self-managing is for everyone, but I've almost gotten so spoiled that I like it so much. Like I do such a good job, and now I have a team member on my team.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm not the one answering tenant calls. She is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. It's not for everybody. Mike and I just moved what was a short-term rental now to a midterm rental under a property manager. So far, we like it because that person's doing a better job than we could do, quite honestly.
Yeah. And I think you reach a point as you scale to where managing your own team just becomes such a process. Like we're at like 50 something units, and like it was at about like that 30-ish plus unit range. All of a sudden it was like, okay, this is becoming a full-time job just to manage the people that are managing our stuff. And so it made sense to just understand it was going to be less efficient. It was going to cost us more, whatever, just to not have to worry about it. But we also have active revenue as well. That's honestly larger than the short-term passive revenue that we'd be saving.
Right. Yeah, our business is that our properties are an output of our business, but they're not our main business. Where if our properties were our main business, that's how we started, then we would be really probably investing in that business a little bit more.
Yeah, it's funny. Mine is the exact same story. I started out with the real estate, and now I have all of these active businesses that really fuel the fire.
Yeah, help you buy more.
Exactly. Yeah. So if somebody wanted to work with your design company to set up midterm rentals, so how does that work? Like, let's say I wanted to buy a property in Cincinnati, Ohio, right? I'm in Washington State. Could you guys do all of that for me from a distance? And what does that process look like?
Absolutely. So there's 2 different ways you can work with us. The first is that we will, like we said, we'll look at the comps, we'll look at the area. We know Cincinnati actually quite well, so that would be an easy one for us to do. And then we will fly out there, furnish it, put it together, and hand you the Airbnb login. And we've written your listing description. We've set up your automated messages. We have created your house manual. And then, of course, decorated and installed. That's the all done for you package, because as you can guess, it's all done for you.
Right.
If you want to save some money and that's not what you want, then you can have us curate the design and we will ship everything to the unit, and either you or someone you hire installs the decor.
That's awesome. It's got
That's
a
lot
bunch of task
work.
rabbits out there just putting together furniture.
Yeah, because for some people it's their first one and they're like, no, I want to get to know the unit. I heard on some podcasts that I should like sleep in my unit, so I'm going to do that. So some people choose that. We call it the awesome from afar package because it is awesome and it's all done from afar.
Yeah.
And some of our clients don't fly out. So they send someone else like a handyman and
Right.
maybe their realtor or their property manager kind of piecemeals it together and then never calls them back. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
Right.
I mean,
No,
you're kidding, but you're not.
but yeah, joking, not joking. That's a lot of work. What you just explained that you guys do in that awesome from away package, like, because I did that for us, like getting everything set up. And if this is like your first short term or first midterm, and like you've got to figure out how to get it listed on all the platforms, and like you said, here's your login. Like that's the kind of service I'm super interested in because I don't like to do all that stuff. I want the expert to optimize it.
And it's so interesting. So I actually haven't told this story at all. So this will be the first place I tell it.
Nice.
So my designer went on vacation because she went on one of my invested adventure trips. And while she was gone, I needed to step in and do the ordering. So Kendra had put all of the pieces together, literally line by line, because that's what we provide our clients, line by line of every item that's going to go in the living room, every item that's going to go in bedroom 1, bedroom 2, so on and so forth. All my job was to click, add to cart, and purchase. It took me 9 hours. And when she came back from vacation, I was like, how was your trip? Tell me everything. How amazing is my other company, Invested Adventures? And I was like, so about our company, Arya Design Services, am I ridiculously slow or is that normal? And she's like, Sarah, I've been telling you for months that is how long it takes. And so I'm like, man, I wish I had really known, because now in every sales pitch, I'm like, do you know how long it will take you? And that's after we've designed it. Like that's after we have compared, because here's what's going to happen is people are going to think that they can furnish on their own, which they absolutely can. And then they're going to spend 35 minutes choosing between different mattress protectors.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Trying to find the one that's $3 cheaper.
So like, what is your time worth? Because you just spent 35 minutes on the mattress protector. Well, you have 700 other items that you need to add to cart. Yeah. And so on average, we're saving our client at least 120 hours.
That's crazy.
And that's if you're fast. But I would guess that most people aren't fast. Yeah. And so it's significant amount of time, and we're not forgetting about the little pieces that you guys might forget about.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. Do you mind sharing what that typical cost range looks like? I don't want to throw off any like sales calls you might have coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, or let's give a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, because that's what most people will do. If you want us to fly out there, it's $6,000 for our designer fee, and then 2 flights. We charge those at cost. And then we will also include 1 U-Haul. So typically what we do is we just Uber to the nearest U-Haul and get a cargo van that typically is cheaper than us renting a vehicle. We want to keep those, again, at cost. So it's about, let's call it $6,700. And that's all done for you. You are seeing the design boards. I should have mentioned that. You're seeing the design boards. You can be as involved or not involved in that process as you want. Once you approve it, and you're going to see that beautiful spreadsheet that Kendra makes with every item we're going to buy. And once you approve it, we are off to the ordering races, and then we fly out and we install. That's all done for you. If you want to save some money and you want to hire someone to do the install, you don't want us to fly out there. And if you're in Detroit in the middle of winter, like please choose Awesome from Afar. And the Awesome from Afar package starts at $3,500.
Okay.
And then goes up depending on the makeup of the house and the size.
Nice. That's not bad. And that includes like the system setup and everything. Yeah, that's pretty much like a no-brainer if you're serious with
honestly, like going through this myself before, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. It's almost like this podcast is sponsored by Arya Design Services.
I know, right? Seriously.
Well, I mean, you already got me thinking, if you're going to make it that easy, like we've always kind of stayed close to home. I'm like, well, maybe we should look at some.
Maybe we go to Cincy and buy some MTRs.
Yeah.
That is music to my ears, because I cannot stress enough that out-of-state investing was the game changer for me.
Yeah.
And it is for so many of my clients.
Let me ask you this question then. Is one of your 4 businesses MTR Property Management?
No.
It should be.
Yeah. That's the next thing. You
That's the next
figure
thing.
that out. You figure
Yeah.
that out. You're doing the setup and you're doing the management. We're just going to call you and we're just
I
going to
will
start
just
buying stuff
write
left
you
and
a
right.
check.
Yeah.
Go buy me a house.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow, that is super
So-
cool.
That's awesome. Cool. So that's all great. I'm super excited to hear all that. And like, honestly, we're going to be reaching out to you here sometime in the future as we start to figure out our buy and holds a little bit more. Cause we're kind of at a standstill with that right now, mostly because we didn't know the best route to go next, but I love the way that you're talking. Let's talk about your Invested Adventures company.
Yeah,
I'd
that
love to
sounds
hear
cool.
about that. I'm a big traveler. A lot of the listeners know that I'm a big traveler. So how did that business come around and what exactly is it and how exactly does it work?
Yeah. So Invested Adventures takes real estate investors on epic adventures. So we're not going to my property in Omaha and hanging out for the weekend. We are going to Guatemala to do goal setting in January. And then we're hiking the W Trek in Patagonia, Chile in March.
Wow.
And African safari in Tanzania in June, followed by Kilimanjaro, the world's tallest freestanding mountain.
Wow.
And that's an 8-day hike.
Yep.
Then for those of you that are like, okay, you lost me at hiking, don't worry. They're not all hiking trips. We're doing a trip to the south of Italy, where this will be the first time that we look at property internationally. I have a real estate investor and real estate agent going to show us property. A friend of mine, Esther, she has bought a $25,000 olive orchard that is income producing.
Wow.
And has built property on it and rents those out and turn them into short-term rentals.
I'm in.
I'm sure that does pretty well.
Yeah.
She does very well.
Yeah.
And then you just get to go visit your property in Italy.
I know. I've heard Italy actually is reasonably priced for properties. I don't know anything about it. I've just heard that as a rumor.
It is when you like look comparatively to other European countries. And so the idea behind Invested Adventures is that we're weirdos, like Dan, Mike, and I. The moment that we decided to like pursue financial independence through real estate investing, it makes us different.
Right.
Like I love that I can see all Tim Ferriss's books behind you, Mike, because like I read the 4-Hour Work Week when I was 23. And I was like, done. I was like, I'm going to go to Buenos Aires to learn dancing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go to Guatemala and learn Spanish. Like, life decided. And now I've been kind of chasing my own tail, figuring out how to pay for it. Well, that's been real estate for me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas most of my clients are the other way around. They've figured out money and they've figured out real estate investing, or they're in the process of figuring it out. But they haven't figured out, how can I go on a vacation that doesn't make me want to have a vacation from my vacation?
Mm-hmm. So true.
How can I meet other real estate investors that is not a conference where we all drink too much and I'm hungover for like a week afterward?
Yeah.
Like, how can I have the best of both worlds, which is community and connectivity, paired with an epic adventure? And that is how Invested Adventures was born.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I love this too, because I have your website pulled up right now and you use some of the places, but you're actually going cool spots, because there's other people that have done similar sort of things, but like, oh, we're all doing a cruise around the Gulf. It's like, I understand like that appeals to people, but like if you're an actual traveler, which especially so many of us that are younger are, like, we don't want to just go on something that leaves from Fort Lauderdale and goes down to Cabo and comes back. Like, you know, that isn't an epic trip, but that's something that's for like retirees or for families or things like that. But so like I have it pulled up right now, and you know, you said your one of the most recent ones that you're doing is a 50-mile hiking trip across Patagonia.
That's legit.
Like, that's super
Those are
legit.
bucket list items.
It is. And being able to do that with people that you're also going to have, you know, networking opportunities and
great conversations and
great. Exactly. You know, that is next level. That's super, super cool.
Mike's signing up for your next one. I can already see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, you just let me know where you want to go and I'll make a trip around it.
Like, seriously, I'd
so
take you up
cool.
on that. You know,
and what happens, you guys, is I call it the after effect. I need to like trademark this.
Yeah.
So the after effect is that you go home and you have that tough conversation with your brother-in-law that you've been meaning to have, or maybe your boss, because you're like, okay, there's all these incredible people that I just spent 4 days with, pouring my soul into them and being poured into. And now I have the courage and the confidence and the tools in my tool belt to go have that fierce conversation with my boss. And then bosses, don't worry, you can send your employees on my trips, because some people then leave the trip and the after effect is that they partner together. So let's say Mike and Dan, you guys came on one of my trips, you guys didn't know each other, and you're like, hey, I'm thinking about this podcast. I've always wanted to start a podcast. And then next thing you know, you guys are starting a podcast. Two people that attended my event last year, they're now partnering on a huge Burr project. And then their private money lender, yep, you guessed it, also at the retreat.
So cool. Yeah. How many people typically attend a retreat then?
I like to keep them around 15 people.
Okay,
so sometimes they're more intimate, like 11 plus me. And then my largest event was 17 plus me.
Wow. And do you have like repeat clients, or is it kind of a churn, or how has that been working?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's kind of 3 different, I'll call them signature events. So we touched on the adventure event because that's easy to talk about, right? Yeah. Adventure is really fun. But you know what we really need? We really need to work on that inner work. Anytime I meet someone that 3 years ago, they told me they wanted to invest in real estate, and then I catch up with them 3 years later and they haven't bought anything, has nothing to do with their knowledge, has nothing to do with their money in the bank. It all has to do with their mindset. And so I have an event that I call the Investor Retreat. And that's where we really dive into what's going on. Like, what's your investing strategy? How can we help you? How can we get you to the next level? It is wildly fun because it's not just, hot seats and masterminds. We do an in-house masseuse. We do private chef. We even did a private concert because we were in the music city of the US, Nashville. That's so cool. So I hired a musician and we had a private concert. And so we're doing really cool things. But frankly, I think the coolest thing you can do for yourself is improve yourself in personal development and in a really radical way. And so that's what the Investor Retreat. And then we talked about the adventurous retreats. And then I also do a goal setting retreat every January. And my goal setting retreats are different. It's not just like, write down your 3 goals. No, you guys, what the heck happened last year? Like, what got you to where you are? Maybe you're really happy with where you are. I mean, it sounds like you guys should be happy where you are. You're in relationships. It looks like you have great partners. You like your podcast. You have 50 units. So you're like, okay, sweet. I'm doing really good. This got me here. But is this going to get me where I'm going?
Yeah, that's super
so valid.
Yeah, I love it. And then back to the quick networking piece too, something that I think a lot of people don't realize if they've never done this sort of like, as like group travel, there's a certain level of relationship that you establish with people on these trips that until you've done it, you don't fully understand. So like my wife and I, we travel a lot. There's a group that we've traveled with several times. It's like for people under 35. And there's been people that, I've spent like a week traveling around Egypt with in this trip. And like to this day, that was several years ago, to this day, one of those people will call me and it's like I'm talking to one of my best friends, even though I've only spent 7 days with them in my entire life. We have this shared experience about traveling, and especially when it's in like a foreign country or an extreme environment or something that's so different, where